There is one more condition, Caroline Whitmore said, sliding the contract toward me. I need you at my house for 6 weeks. I stared at the woman across the polished walnut desk and wondered whether billionaires practiced saying impossible things without blinking. 10 minutes earlier, she had offered me the biggest promotion of my career. Now she wanted me living under her roof. I am sorry, I said. Your house. Caroline's blue eyes held mine. Temporarily. That was 3 weeks after my marriage ended, which was exactly how long it had taken my life to become completely unrecognizable. 3 weeks earlier, I had been sitting on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, surrounded by cardboard boxes and drinking coffee from a paper cup because I could not find my mugs. I was 45 years old, divorced after 17 years. My husband, Daniel, had been seeing someone else for months before I discovered the truth. Oddly, the betrayal was not the part that frightened me most. What frightened me was realizing how little of myself remained when the marriage was gone. Daniel liked quiet colors, so our walls had been beige. He preferred predictable vacations, so we returned to the same places. He thought my sketchbooks were clutter, so eventually I stopped leaving them out. None of those choices seemed important while I was making them. That was the problem. A person can disappear through decisions too small to notice. Rain tapped against my apartment windows that Monday morning while I searched through a box labeled kitchen. My phone rang at 7:46. It was my boss, Nathan Reed. Laura, tell me you are awake. I have coffee. That is close enough. Whitmore Luxury Group called. I stopped digging through the box. Everyone in hospitality design knew Whitmore. Boutique resorts. Restored landmarks. Properties where a weekend cost more than my first car. And everyone knew Caroline Whitmore. 51. Self-made billionaire. Brilliant. Private. Famous for asking one question in meetings and waiting through uncomfortable silence until someone finally gave her an honest answer. What do they need? I asked. You. I laughed. Nathan did not. They asked for you by name. I stood slowly. I have never met Caroline Whitmore. Apparently she knows who you are. 2 hours later, I walked into Whitmore headquarters wearing a navy suit I had almost donated during the move. The building overlooked Elliott Bay, all glass, pale stone, and quiet confidence. I felt like someone had accidentally allowed me into a life more polished than mine. A receptionist led me toward a conference room. Before we reached it, the door opened. Caroline stepped into the hallway. She was taller than I expected, with silver blonde hair, a charcoal jacket, and an expression that made the entire corridor seem quieter. She looked directly at me. Laura Mitchell. Not a question. Yes. She held out a coffee cup. 2% milk. No sugar. I stared at it. How did you know? Something shifted in her expression. Almost a smile. You ordered the same thing at the Pacific Design Forum 9 years ago. My fingers tightened around the cup. I barely remembered attending that conference. You were there. For 20 minutes. And you remember my coffee? No, her gaze stayed on mine. I remember you. Then she opened the conference room door. Come in, Laura. I have been waiting a long time to hear what you think. The conference room was already full when Caroline and I walked in. 6 executives sat around a long table facing renderings of a waterfront resort planned for the Washington coast. Nathan was there too. He gave me a quick nod, followed by the look managers give employees when they desperately want them to be impressive. Caroline took the chair at the head of the table. I sat halfway down, opened my portfolio, and tried not to think about the fact that she remembered me from 9 years ago. The presentation began. 20 minutes of polished stone, dramatic lighting, imported furniture, and rooms so perfectly arranged they looked untouched by human life. Everyone praised the concept. Caroline said almost nothing. Then she turned toward me. Laura, what do you think? My mouth went dry. Nathan leaned forward as if he might rescue me. Caroline noticed. I asked Laura. The room became painfully quiet. I looked at the renderings. Again. For 17 years, I had become skilled at giving answers that caused no friction. Daniel called it being reasonable. Sitting there, I suddenly understood how much that habit had cost me. It is beautiful, I said. Several people relaxed. But nobody will feel anything there. The relief vanished. Caroline tilted her head. Explain. I pointed toward the largest rendering. That property sits beside one of the most dramatic coastlines in the Pacific Northwest, but every room could be in New York, Miami, or Los Angeles. You have hidden the place beneath luxury. A man across from me frowned. Our guests expect sophistication. Sophistication does not require removing personality. I heard my heartbeat, but I kept going. Use local cedar. Keep the weathered stone. Let guests hear the rain. Give them a window seat where they can watch the water instead of another piece of furniture chosen because it photographs well. Nathan shifted beside me. Caroline remained completely still. What would you change first? She asked. I looked at the main lobby rendering. The entrance. Why? Because right now it announces money before it offers welcome. Silence again. Then Caroline closed the presentation folder. Thank you. I could not tell whether I had impressed her or ended my career. She stood. Everyone except Laura, please give us the room. Nathan collected his papers slowly. As he passed behind me, he whispered, whatever happens, do not argue. The door closed. Caroline walked toward the windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Gray water moved beneath a pale Seattle sky. Do people often tell you not to argue with me? She asked. I stared at her back. Was that supposed to remain private? She turned, and to my surprise she smiled. You were the only person in this room who told me what you actually thought. You asked. People hear billionaire and somehow forget that part. I almost smiled. Maybe they enjoy being employed. Do you? Very much. She laughed softly. Then she crossed to a cabinet and removed a slim black portfolio. She placed it in front of me. My name was printed on the cover. I opened it and stopped breathing for a second. Inside were sketches from the Pacific Design Forum 9 years earlier. My sketches. A small coastal inn built around weathered timber, natural light, and rooms designed to feel lived in rather than displayed. Where did you get this? The Forum archive. Why? Caroline looked at one drawing for a long moment. Because I remembered how it made me feel. I looked up. 9 years is a long time to remember a student-level concept. You were not a student. I felt like one. Her expression softened. You designed a place where someone could arrive exhausted and feel permitted to exhale. The words landed somewhere deeper than professional praise. Caroline slid the portfolio toward me. That is what I want on the coast. And if you disagree with my decisions, then convince me. For the first time since my divorce, I felt something unfamiliar moving beneath the uncertainty. Not confidence exactly. The beginning of it. I closed the portfolio. When do I start? Caroline's eyes held mine. You already did. For the next 2 weeks, the coastal project consumed nearly every waking hour I had. I drove west from Seattle before sunrise, crossed miles of wet highway, and reached the property with coffee cooling beside me and sketches scattered across the passenger seat. The resort sat above the Pacific, where dark evergreens met gray water, and the wind carried salt through every unfinished room. Caroline appeared at more meetings than I expected. She questioned everything. So did I. By the second week, I had stopped rehearsing my answers before speaking to her. Then on a Tuesday morning, our project manager called an emergency meeting. A supplier responsible for the custom cedar paneling had pushed delivery back 10 weeks. The delay threatened the opening schedule. Richard Sloan, a Whitmore board executive overseeing project costs, joined by video from Seattle. We replace it with imported composite panels, he said. They can arrive next week. I ran my hand across a sample of the original cedar. They will also look wrong. Richard sighed. Guests will not know the difference. I will. His expression tightened on the screen. Laura, we have a schedule. Caroline stood beside the windows, watching me rather than Richard. What do you recommend? She asked. Give me 1 day. Richard started to object. Caroline interrupted calmly. She has 1 day. I spent the next 9 hours calling mills across Washington and Oregon. Just before 7 that evening, I found a small supplier outside Tacoma that could produce reclaimed cedar panels from locally salvaged timber. The material matched the property better, could arrive in 4 weeks, and reduce the projected costs by nearly $180,000. I sent Caroline the numbers at 8:43. Her reply arrived almost immediately. Come to my office tomorrow. The next morning, a cream-colored folder waited on her desk. Sit down, Caroline said. You make that sound ominous. I am told I have that effect. I opened the folder. Creative Director, Whitmore Luxury Group. Full-time executive position. Authority over design standards for every new property in the company. Then I saw the salary and looked up. This is almost twice what I make now. I know. Because I found Cedar? Because you protected the identity of a project while saving us money under pressure. Her voice softened. Yesterday only confirmed what I already believed about you. I should have felt nothing except excitement. Instead, 17 years of compromise whispered that large gifts always came with invisible conditions. What is the catch? Caroline became still. The project enters final construction next week. For approximately 6 weeks, decisions will start before sunrise and sometimes continue late into the evening. All right. The drive from Seattle makes that impractical. I waited. There is a private estate about 20 minutes from the project, she continued. I stay there when I am on the coast. I understood where this was going. Caroline, there are separate wings. You would have your own room, office, and entrance if you prefer. And you would be my employer. Yes. I closed the folder. Then I cannot live with you. She did not argue. I understand. That surprised me more than the offer. I took the contract home without signing it. That evening, Seattle rain hammered against my apartment windows while I made pasta and tried to convince myself I had made the sensible choice. Then the building alarm sounded. A sprinkler malfunction 2 floors above mine had sent water through several apartments, including mine. The building manager inspected the damage and shook his head. You cannot stay here until this is repaired. I looked at the wet ceiling, then at the contract on my kitchen counter. 40 minutes later, I stood beside my window with Caroline's number glowing on my phone. When she answered, her voice was quiet. Laura. I closed my eyes. Tell me something. Anything. Does that separate entrance come with its own coffee maker? There was a pause. Then I heard her laugh. 2% milk. No sugar. I smiled despite myself. You remembered. Caroline's voice softened. I told you, Laura. I remember you. 2 days later, I drove west with 3 suitcases, a box of design samples, and more uncertainty than I wanted to admit. The estate stood on a wooded bluff above Puget Sound, about 20 minutes from the resort project. Cedar shingles had weathered silver beneath decades of rain. Tall windows faced the water, and evergreens surrounded the house so completely that Seattle already felt much farther away than it was. Caroline met me at the front door wearing dark jeans and a cream sweater instead of the tailored suits I associated with her. Your entrance is around the east side, she said. Your office is downstairs. I had a coffee maker delivered. I looked at her. You actually remembered that part? I take contractual negotiations seriously. I laughed, and something in her expression softened. During the day, the house was merely where we slept. We left before 7 each morning and returned after contractors had gone home. But after sunset, the professional architecture around us changed. Caroline stopped being the woman who could silence a boardroom with one look. She played old soul records while answering emails. She drank chamomile tea from a chipped blue mug. She could negotiate a multimillion-dollar acquisition but somehow ruined grilled cheese. How is this possible? I asked one evening, staring at the blackened bread. I delegated cooking very early in my career. Clearly a strategic decision. By the end of the first week, we had developed a rhythm I had not planned for. Coffee before sunrise. Separate cars to the project. Long days of decisions. Then quiet conversations in the kitchen when neither of us was ready to sleep. Caroline never asked about Daniel until a storm rolled in on Friday night. Rain struck the windows hard enough to blur the water beyond them. Just after 9, the electricity failed. The backup system flickered once, then went dark. We ended up beside the living room fireplace with candles on the mantel and blankets over our knees. Can I ask you something personal? Caroline said. You can ask. Why did you stay 17 years? I watched the fire move across the cedar logs. Because leaving would have meant admitting I had spent years becoming someone I did not recognize. I swallowed. Daniel's betrayal ended the marriage, But it did not erase me. I had been doing that myself, one compromise at a time. Caroline looked down at her tea. What are you trying to get back? My opinions. My sketchbooks. The ability to choose a restaurant without wondering whether someone else will complain. She smiled faintly. That sounds manageable. You would be surprised. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the sound. I studied her face in the candlelight. What about you? What about me? You built an empire around luxury, but you live like someone trying not to need anything. Her smile disappeared. For several seconds only rain filled the room. I learned a long time ago that needing someone gives time something to take from you. The sadness in her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. Caroline. She stood abruptly and carried her mug toward the kitchen. We should check the windows upstairs. I followed her through the dark hallway, our candles casting moving shadows across the walls. At the west end of the second floor, she stopped before a closed door. Every other room had been opened, aired, or used for storage. This one had an old brass lock. A thin line of water had appeared beneath the frame. There is a leak, I said. Caroline stared at it. I see it. We should open the room. Her fingers tightened around the candle. Not tonight. I looked from the water to her face. What is in there? For the first time since I had met Caroline Whitmore, she looked less like a billionaire guarding a secret and more like a woman standing outside a memory she was afraid to enter. A life, she said softly, that I once thought I would still be living. By morning, the storm had moved east, but the thin line of water beneath the locked door had widened. Caroline stood beside me while the maintenance supervisor examined the ceiling and wall. We need access from inside, he said. Otherwise we cannot tell where the moisture is traveling. Caroline did not answer immediately. Then she reached into a small drawer in the hallway table and removed an old brass key. Give us 10 minutes, she said. When we were alone, she stared at the lock. You do not have to explain anything to me, I told her. I know. She slipped the key into the door. That might be why I want to. The room smelled faintly of cedar, dust, and something floral that had almost disappeared with time. A piano stood near the windows beneath a linen cover. Shelves held sheet music and old records. A green scarf rested across the back of a chair as if its owner might return for it after lunch. Caroline remained in the doorway. Her name was Judith. I turned toward her. We met when I was 34. She taught music at a community college outside Seattle. Caroline smiled faintly. She thought my obsession with work was ridiculous. She sounds perceptive. A quiet laugh escaped her. She was. Caroline walked to the piano and lifted the cover. We were together for 11 years. We bought this estate because Judith wanted somewhere with enough quiet to hear herself think. Her fingers rested on the polished wood. We plan to live here eventually. I understood before she said more. You lost her. Caroline nodded. She became ill. We kept talking about next summer. Then next spring. There was always another quarter, another acquisition, another reason I thought we had time. She looked toward the water. We did not. I stayed beside her, without reaching for her. Some moments needed presence more than touch. After she died, I closed this room. Years later, when Whitmore began developing the resort nearby, I considered selling the estate. What changed? Caroline crossed to a cabinet and removed a thin folder. She handed it to me. Inside was a copy of my Pacific Design Forum portfolio. The same work she had shown me in Seattle, except this copy contained my original project statement. A sentence near the bottom had been underlined in pencil. A meaningful space should remember who we were while leaving room for who we might become. I stared at my younger handwriting. I forgot I wrote this. I did not. Caroline's voice was almost a whisper. I heard you speak at the forum for less than 20 minutes. You talked about buildings carrying memory without becoming museums. Judith had been gone only a year. I looked at her. That is why you remembered me. Yes. And why you requested me for the resort. She nodded. When your firm submitted its design team, I saw your name. I wondered whether the woman who wrote those words still believed them. The question landed harder than I expected. 9 years ago, I had believed spaces could change people. Then marriage, deadlines, and compromise had made that certainty feel naive. I am not sure she did, I admitted. Caroline met my eyes. Maybe I was hoping we could both find out. The maintenance supervisor returned later and traced the leak to damaged flashing above the west wing. Nothing inside the room needed to be removed. By afternoon, sunlight broke through the clouds. I found Caroline at the piano, opening the curtains for the first time in years. Light spilled across the keys. She pressed one gently, and a single imperfect note filled the room. Judith would complain that it needs tuning, she said. Was she usually right? Almost always. I smiled. Caroline opened the second curtain, and Puget Sound appeared beyond the glass, silver beneath the clearing sky. Standing there, I understood why she had chosen me. Not to erase what had happened, not to rescue her from grief. She wanted someone who might help her make room beside it. And somewhere inside me, I was beginning to wonder whether I needed the same thing. After Judith's music room was opened, something shifted between Caroline and me. Nothing dramatic. Nothing either of us could point to and name. It lived in smaller things. The way she left tea beside my sketches when I worked late. The way I began recognizing her footsteps in the hallway. The way silence stopped feeling empty when she was in it. I started drawing for myself again. Not floor plans. Not elevations. I sketched the curve of Puget Sound at sunrise, the cedar trees beyond the terrace, Caroline's chipped blue mug beside an unfinished crossword. One Saturday morning, she found me at the kitchen table with charcoal on my fingers. "May I see?" she asked. My instinct was to close the sketchbook. Daniel had treated personal work as something childish, something to put away when real life required attention. Then I remembered that Daniel no longer got a vote. I turned the sketchbook toward her. Caroline studied each page slowly. "You drew my mug. It has character." "That is a polite word for chipped. I am a designer. Polite words are expensive." She laughed, and I felt absurdly proud of causing it. That afternoon, after a long site meeting, we walked along the terrace overlooking the sound. The rain had cleared, leaving the air cold and sharp. Far below, the water reflected a narrow strip of pale gold. Caroline rested her hands on the railing. "When did you stop asking yourself what you wanted?" she asked. I looked at her. "You remember everything I say, do you not?" "Only the things that matter." My chest tightened. I turned toward the water. There was not one moment. I think that is why I missed it. I chose Daniel's restaurant because it was easier. His vacation because he cared more. His paint color because mine seemed unimportant. Eventually, I stopped having a first choice. And now I am trying to become the first person I ask. Caroline was quiet. "What did you ask yourself today?" I smiled. Whether I wanted to take this walk. And I did. When I turned, she was closer than before. Not touching me. Just close enough that I noticed the faint scent of her soap and the silver strands moving across her cheek in the wind. Her eyes dropped briefly toward my face, then returned to mine. "Laura," she said softly. My name sounded different in her voice. I knew what was happening. More importantly, I knew what I wanted. Caroline lifted one hand slowly, giving me every chance to move. Her fingertips brushed a strand of hair away from my cheek. Warmth traveled through me, quiet but unmistakable. For one suspended second, I imagined closing the remaining distance. Then I saw the Whitmore identification badge clipped inside my coat. Reality returned. I stepped back. Caroline lowered her hand immediately. "I am sorry." "Do not be." I swallowed. "That is what makes this difficult." Her expression changed. "You wanted me to?" "Yes." Saying it aloud frightened me less than I expected. "But you are connected to my paycheck, Caroline. You offered me a career I have wanted for years. I cannot begin something with you while wondering whether gratitude, power, or fear is influencing my answer." She looked toward the water, then back at me. "You are right. No argument. No persuasión. I will respect that." The next morning, Caroline left for Seattle before sunrise. My coffee was waiting beside the machine with a small note saying our private project meetings would return to regular business hours. I stood alone in the kitchen, holding the warm cup between my hands. I had protected myself. I had chosen clarity over longing. It was exactly the kind of decision the woman I was becoming should make. And yet, when I heard Caroline's car disappear down the long driveway, the house felt larger than it had the day before. The distance between Caroline and me lasted 5 days, and somehow her respect made it hurt more. She kept every promise. Our meetings happened during business hours. Doors stayed open. Conversations remained focused on schedules, materials, budgets, and the approaching opening date. She never made me uncomfortable. She never mentioned the terrace. I told myself this was exactly what I wanted. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my phone began vibrating across the drafting table. Nathan called first. Then 2 former coworkers. Then, designer I had not spoken to in years. I ignored them until a message arrived from an old colleague. Laura, you need to see this before it gets worse. Beneath her message was a screenshot from a private hospitality forum. No names appeared, but the details were unmistakable. Recently divorced designer. Billionaire client. Sudden executive promotion. Temporary residence at a private coastal estate. The anonymous writer wondered whether professional talent had really earned such rapid advancement. I read it twice. Heat climbed into my face, followed by something colder. Doubt. The same doubt I had spent years allowing other people to plant inside me. Maybe I had not earned any of this. Maybe Caroline had simply decided I mattered. By late afternoon, whispers had reached the project team. I closed my laptop and found Caroline in a temporary site office with Richard Sloan. Richard glanced at me and smiled without warmth. Laura, you have become surprisingly popular today. Caroline's expression sharpened. Richard. He lifted both hands. I did not write anything. But people notice unusual career trajectories. I looked directly at him. If you have concerns about my work, say them. Your work is not what people are discussing. Caroline stood. That is enough. Richard gathered his papers and left. The moment the door closed, I placed my phone on the desk. Caroline read the post in silence. I will have our legal and communications teams handle this. No, she looked up. That is not what I need. My voice trembled once, then steadied. I need to know exactly how my promotion happened. Your work was evaluated. By whom? The board. Did you vote? Caroline hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. There is an internal review underway, she said. I am restricted from discussing certain board matters. My stomach tightened. An internal review involving my promotion? I cannot answer that. Do you understand what your silence sounds like right now? Pain moved across her face. Yes. I wanted to trust her. I wanted the weeks at the estate, the portfolio, Judith's room, and every quiet morning between us to be enough. But I had spent too many years accepting reassurance instead of asking for facts. I cannot stay, I said. Caroline went still. At the estate? At Whitmore. I removed my identification badge and placed it on the desk. Human Resources will have my formal resignation tonight. Her eyes stayed on mine. Laura, do not let an anonymous rumor decide what your work is worth. I am not. I am trying to find out what I believe it is worth without needing you to tell me. She could have argued. She could have reminded me what I was walking away from. Instead, she nodded. Then I will not stop you. 2 hours later, I drove back toward Seattle with my suitcases behind me. Caroline did not call. She did not send anyone after me. She let me leave, and somewhere between the dark evergreens and the city lights, I understood that respecting my choice might have been the hardest thing she could have done. My apartment repairs were finally complete. I had barely carried the first suitcase inside when my phone rang. The caller was Evelyn Brooks, a Whitmore board member I had met during my first week. Laura, she said, I cannot discuss the internal review, but there is part of your employment record you are entitled to see. I stopped beside the unopened boxes. What part? Evelyn paused. The date your promotion was first recommended. Evelyn sent the document through a secure Whitmore portal. While we were still on the phone, I opened it at my kitchen counter, surrounded by boxes I had never fully unpacked. The first page carried a date that made me sit down. My promotion had been recommended nearly 5 weeks before Caroline asked me to stay at the estate. Before the storm. Before Judith's music room. Before that afternoon on the terrace when I admitted I wanted her. I kept reading. Leadership potential. Strong financial judgment. exceptional ability to preserve regional character while controlling project costs. Then I reached the approval record. Caroline had submitted my work for consideration, but she had removed herself from the final vote. She recused herself? I asked. Yes, Evelyn said. She believed her previous interest in your work created a potential conflict. I closed my eyes. The rumor had taken the thing I feared most and made it sound plausible. But the dates did not lie. Whatever existed between Caroline and me had not purchased my career. Why could she not tell me? Because the board is conducting an internal review connected to the coastal project. Everyone involved has been instructed not to discuss matters under examination. Evelyn paused. I cannot tell you what we are reviewing, but I can suggest something you are entitled to do. What? Look again at the vendor files you personally approved. After we ended the call, I opened my project records. I started with the cedar crisis. Richard had pushed imported composite panels through a vendor called Northstar Architectural Supply. Then I checked the stone package, lighting consultants, and 2 proposed furnishing substitutions. Different contracts. Different amounts. The same pattern. Richard repeatedly favored a small group of vendors whose proposals were more expensive than comparable alternatives. Every time I had challenged one, Whitmore had saved money. By midnight, I had a spreadsheet of dates, proposals, revisions, and cost differences. It was not proof of misconduct. I knew better than to pretend it was, but it was enough to justify questions. The next morning, I called Evelyn. I want to present what I found. Caroline could present it for you. I looked at the rain sliding down my apartment window. For 17 years, I had let other people speak first because it seemed easier. No, I said. These are my observations. I will present them. The board meeting began at 11:30 at Whitmore headquarters. Caroline was standing near the windows when I entered. Surprise crossed her face, followed by something warmer, but she stayed where she was. She understood that I had not come back for her. Not yet. Richard sat halfway down the table. I placed my documents before the board and started with the cedar proposal. Then the stone. Then the consultants. No accusations. Only numbers. Richard interrupted me. You are a designer, Laura. You are not an auditor. Correct, I said. That is why I am not telling this board what these patterns mean. I am asking qualified people to determine whether they mean anything at all. Silence settled over the room. Evelyn glanced toward the board chair. After several questions, the chair announced that Richard would step away from the coastal project, while an independent review examined the vendor relationships. When the meeting ended, I gathered my papers and walked into the hallway. Caroline followed several seconds later. Laura. I turned. I wanted to tell you. I know that now. And your position was always yours. I looked through the glass wall at the board members still seated inside. I know that too. Caroline's eyes softened. Are you coming back? I resigned. You did. So if Whitmore wants me back, the board can make an offer. A slow smile appeared on her face. Good. I raised an eyebrow. Good. Because this time, Laura, I should not be the person deciding what you are worth. I looked toward the conference room door. For once, I did not need anyone to open it for me. I reached for the handle myself. 3 weeks later, I signed a new contract with Whitmore Luxury Group. Same title, same salary, different terms. I would report to the chief operating officer, and an independent committee would oversee my performance reviews. Caroline would remain the founder, but she would have no direct authority over my career. When I signed my name, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, ownership. By early summer, the coastal resort was ready to open. Local cedar warmed the lobby walls. Weathered stone remained exactly where time had left its marks. Deep window seats faced the Pacific, inviting guests to watch the rain instead of escaping it. On opening night, I stood near the entrance and watched people arrive. A woman set down her suitcase and immediately walked toward the windows. An older couple sat beside the fireplace talking quietly. Someone laughed from the dining room. The building felt alive. I had trusted my instincts and they had brought me here. Later that evening, I drove the 20 minutes to Caroline's estate. I found her alone on the terrace overlooking Puget Sound. The sky was streaked with lavender, and the last light shimmered across the water. You disappeared, I said. Caroline turned. I thought you might find me. That sounds confident. Hopeful. I stood beside her. For a moment neither of us spoke. The first time I asked you to stay here, she said, you needed somewhere to go. My apartment ceiling was very persuasive. She laughed softly. Then her expression grew serious. But you do not need this house now. You do not need my position, my money, or my approval. No, and I do not want you to. She looked at me. So I am not asking you to move anywhere. I smiled. That is encouraging. I am asking whether you would have dinner with me. Such a small question. Yet it meant more than the promotion ever had. There was no contract between us now. No uncertainty about who controlled my future. I had my apartment. My career. My sketchbooks were open on my kitchen table again. I knew what I wanted. Yes, I said. Caroline smiled. You choose the restaurant. I laughed. Absolutely. I reached for her hand. She met me halfway, her fingers closing gently around mine. We did not rush anything after that. We had Sunday breakfasts, long drives, museum afternoons, and quiet evenings listening to records. I kept my apartment. Caroline kept the estate. Judith's music room stayed exactly where it belonged, but the curtains remained open. Months later, Caroline had the piano tuned. The first time she played it again, she cried. I sat beside her without trying to fix anything. That was when I finally understood what love had become for both of us. Not rescue. Not replacement. Not surrender. Love was having a life of your own and still making room for someone inside it. I had spent 17 years believing peace meant wanting less. I was wrong. Sometimes healing begins when you finally allow yourself to want honestly. Thank you for spending this time with our story. If it stayed with you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that beginning again has no expiration date. Thank you for listening, and remember, the right love does not ask you to disappear. It gives you room to remain fully yourself.